There it is. Go live. And it's going to record. It's going to put that everything that I just said. The go live. Is it doing it? All right. So we have that going. We are live on the streaming channel. And folks, if you'll just be patient with me, I just need to bring up the page on my screen, because when we went live, it closed it. So I'm going to do that real quick before we start chatting with Dean, and then we'll get right to you. Always going to be technical difficulties.
Oh, yeah.
All right, there we are. We're live. Okay. So, I'm not going to answer a quick question there. All right. So we are live. We really are. Despite my technical challenges. And we're live with Dean Zachary, who is the artist behind much of what you see of the interior art of all the Lightraiders books that are going to be in the boxed set. And we're going to show off some of that artwork tonight. We're going to chat with Dean about his process, about his inspiration, and he's had a huge influence on this, on what Lightraiders looks like. So, Dean, thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, James. This is a pleasure, and I've been looking forward to it.
I've been looking forward to this too. This is quite exciting for me. And I would like you to just begin by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay. All right. Easy enough. I decided I wanted to draw comics when I was a teenager, heavily influenced by artists like John Byrne, Neil Adams, Gil Kane, John Romita, and then later Jim Lee. I love the idea of not a hyper-realistic look, but what I call a superhero realism that was really, I guess, defined mostly by Neil Adams' more cinematic approach, specifically with Batman. So as a young person, I read a lot of X-Men and Spider-Man, but then over at DC, I always picked up the Batman books because of just the art itself. And then, of course, you know, fell in love with the character as most of us did, and made it a goal of mine that I wanted to draw Batman someday. Well, you know, so does everyone. So, you know, time went by, jobs and growing up and all of that. And one day I was in a bookstore and I looked over at the turnstile and there were comics again. And I had sort of left them behind and looked through some of the art, and I wasn't that impressed. And I thought, well, gee, I bet I could draw a little better than that. And so an inner voice sort of said, well, why don't you give it a shot? So I started to submit. And in those days, you had to build up a sample portfolio, and you would make copies of that portfolio. And then you would package that with your contact information, and you'd send it to New York, to Marvel and DC, and hope for a response. And so after several rounds, and some editorial critiques, I eventually got the opportunity to draw for a small up-and-coming company called Malibu, which started up in the early 90s. And I started drawing my first full-color comic book for superheroes was The Ferret, which was kind of an interesting version of Wolverine for Malibu at the time. And that led to a project called The Nightman, which eventually became a TV show for just a short time. He was also a nighttime Avenger sort of character, very similar to Batman. Eventually that led to actually getting work with DC and being able to draw Batman. So, you know, realizing a childhood dream there, heavily influenced not just by artists, though. I also have to explain that film was always a huge part of my inspiration. I paid attention to cinematography, specifically from directors like Ridley Scott, who painstakingly created atmosphere and environments. And what I learned by observing cinematography and directors like Ridley Scott were things like textures in the atmosphere, surface textures. You'll remember particularly a scene near the end of the first Alien movie where Ripley is trying to escape, and she climbs up through a hole in the floor, and we have sirens spinning and smoke machines, and you can see the beads of sweat on her face. And it just struck me that creating that level of immersive atmosphere was something I wanted to do with my two-dimensional art as well. So from that point on, what I tried to do, and you see it more and more as I matured in my career, was I tried my best to give you a sense of place, primarily a time of day, lighting, textures. I love having smoke or rain or leaves falling, or snow falling, that sort of thing. I love an environment that's as immersive as possible. And also, to the degree that is possible with two-dimensional comic book art, I like to really impress upon the viewer a sense of in being encapsulated in the environment. You should almost be able to smell it. Like if you're walking down a street and it's Christmas time, you should be able to smell the cinnamon and the chestnuts and the whole thing. I want it to be immersive as possible, but I also love camera angles that usually are more difficult to draw. And I try to use camera angles based on what the screenwriter, or I should say the scriptwriter, wants in terms of drama, close-ups, medium shots, establishing shots, and long shots. I try to give a variety per page while still serving the story as much as possible. So what I want to give the reader is a balance of visuals. I don't want too many close-ups. I don't want too many establishing shots. And I also try to keep it to about 5 panels a page. So that's jumping in a little bit into the creative process itself. But inspiration-wise, I really want to focus on the fact that film was one of the biggest influences. Movies like Alien and Gladiator and Blade Runner, and then action pictures from that era, like the Lethal Weapon movies from the 80s, and as we get into the 90s, more the movies that began to reflect interest in comic books, like The Crow and like The Matrix, where you could tell that they were heavily influenced by the comic book medium. And I think now we've seen so much of it that it's part of our pop culture. Just it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere.
It is, yeah, much more so than when I was a child, and then when my parents were kids. It is amazing. There must be millions of kids over the years who have wanted and dreamed of doing what you do, of drawing Batman, of drawing other characters, and so what a blessing that you're there, and what a blessing to us is that you're a brother in Christ, and you were willing to work on the Lightraiders project.
Absolutely.
We praise God for you almost every day. I'm not sure if you realize that.
I do appreciate that, and I also
fanboyish here. So we want to talk about. I want to grab onto a couple things you said there before we jump into some of the stuff. One of the things you mentioned was the atmosphere, and we don't get to showcase it a lot in your art for us, but you do in especially a couple of pieces, because a lot of it is pure creature art that we're putting in a spot or something. But in your location drawings, the Aladoth woman who's got her butcher blade and stuff. Yeah, there's all of her surroundings. And then we're gonna show it in just a bit, but the Guardian picture with the leaves blowing around him, that is such a dynamic shot for a single character that fits in a single page in the books, which is well done.
Thank you.
You created movement for that, which was really nice. You also did in the Dayspring. There's, I think, in the Guardian is in the image that we sent out for letting people know about this live stream, and so is the Dayspring Red Willow, half covered up by a book, but it also has that. And then the secret graphic that we can't say what it's for. But if you are a backer, you can go to the updates and see when we're talking about the stretch goal for the 15,000 level. We put that in. It's backer only. So if you want to see the sketch, you got to back us. But camera angle. You talked about camera angle, and I feel like you had a pretty unique and powerful camera angle that you created for that full scene in that sketch, which everybody will be able to experience if we can hit the 15,000 level.
Absolutely. What I tried to do, and without revealing the content as much as possible, what I tried to do was, again, create a sense of adventure, but also a sense of what Lightraiders is about. I remember when we first started working together, and I created what would become the uniform, the tactical vest, so to speak. One of the first designs that occurred to me was I wanted to reflect a Crusader's tunic without drawing a Crusader's tunic. And so the idea was to configure the pouches that are very common on military vests.
You're right.
And configure them in a cross shape. And also when it came to both using shading, was to make that configuration of the cross shape darker, because there we are. When the coloring comes around, yes, exactly. So there it is, the tactical vest, and you can see that the pouches are in a cross shape. And I wanted that definitely to be there, because obviously for the content and the storytelling, and this being a gospel-based project. And I want to take a moment, that since we brought that up, to really say that I've decided, and this project was really a blessing to my life, because what it did was it forced me to reevaluate all my work and what I'd been working on at the time. And it moved me to make a commitment to have my work reflect my faith. It's interesting that in the culture itself, comic books in the 90s, for example, were not overtly religious, obviously, but there was this understanding that good and evil was defined specifically so, and that the heroes were fighting evil, and they stood for an ideological, abstract sense of good. And that degraded over time to the point where now some of the heroes are either moral relativists, or they're fighting for their town or their city rather than, light over darkness. So this gave me a chance. This project, Lightraiders, gave me a chance to really include my faith into my fantasy art. So that being said, you can see here there's a lot of Crusader reference. There's also a reference to a priestly collar in the under tunic there, under the vest. That staff you can talk about more than I in specific terms, James, but again, I wanted almost something that was Old Testament in a way, in the way you described it. Talk a little bit about your description and whether I met it and whether that worked or not.
No, you met it. Absolutely. So we wanted something that reflected Connor from the stories, who also carries a crook, but slightly different. I think you did that. When I'd put it into the description documents, I did not expect, actually, when you came out when you brought it forward, to see the spiral of steel there, and that's what that is. In that, I expected it to look a little bit different, maybe lower on the staff or tighter. And then the guard I really love at the top. So we've got the ram's horn, and it's got a steel spike on it. We've got the spiral of steel, and this really looks like something that was forged by the elder folk we call the Arofa in the stories. And so this character precedes Connor in the lore. So the game precedes the books. The knights that will guide you in the game become the guardians in the stories. And so this is before Connor, but we're seeing this crook appear. So we have a little bit of that connection. You also have some things in here, the symbology, and in all the cadets have a little bit of symbology from the academy and from the world. So the fountain and the flame, which we'll get back when we finish the campaign. We'll get back if you're following those stories. We'll get back to the online stories of the fountain and the flame. But the fountain and the flame are symbols from the Great Rescue story. And they were symbols of the creator and to become the rescuer. So the fountain and the flame are kind of like cross symbols in our world, and you make those appear on the different Lightraider characters in your artwork with symbols on their belts and things like that. If you're watching and you're wondering, the pouches, the tactical vest sort of thing that we talked about, that Dean talked about, is your mini kit vest. And so in the Lightraiders realm, if you haven't read the books, that's one of the ways that they are able to stay mobile, to carry all their stuff. So instead of having a big pack, they have smaller amounts of things in small pouches in various formations all over the place. So this one has and I think we do the cross symbol for all of the cadet characters, Dean? Now I'm troubled. Yeah. I could just pull it up in front of me because it's sitting on my desk. Yeah. So we have that on all of them. But in the stories, there's a number of different formations of these vests, and you go to the outfitter at the academy to get fitted with your vest when you're a cadet. So anyway, this is how you can carry more items, and so you can have it from a game perspective, how you can have more item slots and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the share now. So we talked about that Lightraider character. Let's talk about my favorite character. I have to be careful how I say favorite bad character.
Right.
But in your execution, it looks like it walks right off the pages of the books. And so let's talk about the oak squid. Let's talk about the tree troll. Tell me what you were thinking when you got the description of that.
Well, the way you described it was a living tree that walked on its roots. There were runes covering it, and it was horrifying. Your description in that almost opening its mouth and it would effuse, almost a swarm, and it carried a whip, and I almost got. It was almost in my mind as if I wanted to give the impression of the Balrog from Lord of the Rings mixed with a living ent, a tree. So pure evil. And what I wanted to do was go a little bit darker even than that. So I gave it multiple eyes, which I don't think was in the description, which gave it sort of almost an even more sinister and alien look to it. But the main thrust of it was I wanted the creature to look mobile, deadly, but also so horrifying upon first viewing that you're almost frozen with fear when you see it. So almost the look stuns you. And I remember I had several designs when I would submit things to you, but there was one that I was particularly attached to, and I was very pleased that was the one you wanted. So why don't we share that if we can, so we can.
Here he comes.
Okay, good deal. Yeah.
There he is, I think, up on the screen, and
yes.
And he does. He looks like he walked right off the pages of the novel, and just even more scary. And so more of what he looks like began to be incorporated as the book series went on. Yeah, I mean, there's so much detail here. You've got the moss and vines kind of hanging off of him. You've got the spores coming out and the grit falling off of him. You've got that just absolutely wicked whip. Also because I love what you did with his hands. They're claws, they're branch twig claws that are gripping the axe. And he's got my son calls him oh shoot, General Grievous the tree.
Yeah, I can see that.
He wants to see one with lightsabers, so we'll have to work on that in the
We'll
future.
have to work something out.
Yeah, you really did absolutely not just nail the description, but go beyond description, and you did that several times on all of these. So if you like the troll and you're watching, give us a note. I got a comment here from White Winged Dragonfly. Says, as an AM, that is everything I want to see in an illustration of a creature. It gives me ideas of how it'd attack and move, and describe the threatening. Amazing job. So one of his players says, we're doomed. So we have a whole Lightraiders group watching all at once here. And Jeff Wright says, I'm a fan of miniatures, but I think some standees with Dean's artwork would be great as well. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, something that we can look at. Maybe if we start heading towards 500 backers, we can do that.
Yeah.
I'll put it out there early on in this live. I might put Dean on the spot for a second here. So if we can get to the 500 backer mark, so we're right now we got a goal of 15,000, and so we're almost to 13,000, so we're well on our way. And if we can hit that, then we're going to do mini posters of your sketch. That again, if you haven't backed, you can back, and then you can go to the updates and see the preview there. But if we can hit those 500 backers, maybe an idea would be to do a Dean versus Kirk. So if you're not familiar and you're watching, Dean did the internal art, Kirk did the covers and the box cover. And what if we had a screen, an Adventure Master screen, 4-panel screen with our quick reference page rules right there on the inside, and on the outside, maybe a Dean illustration coming at a Kirk illustration. So we'll have to. What are your thoughts on that, Dean? Would you be willing to do something like that?
I would be up for that. Absolutely, that would be fantastic.
Awesome. So you heard it, folks. I haven't asked Kirk yet. Kirk, if you're watching, we'll send you an email. But we will do, if we can hit 500 backers, we'll put that on the books, because we can make that into A4 and fit in the box, and something special for just our backers. Let's see here. So I want to keep going though. The structures, and this is a big one. Almost want to save this for later, but let's jump into it. All of us that were part of the original Dragon Raid, and you can see the box right behind me over my shoulder. And actually, I've got this. My parents just brought this over. No kidding. This is I'm gonna digitize it and get it up. But my mom just brought this over. But that is actually me at a birthday party receiving my first Dragon Raid box back in the 80s.
You haven't changed a bit.
Yeah. So young me versus, I got glasses now. My haircut is pretty close to the same. Sure. Where was I going with that? Our image of what Light Raider Academy should look like. And so I sent you descriptions, and what you came back with is just absolutely beautiful. And nobody has been able to do this. So we do have different images that came kind of before. There's kind of a Light Raider Academy on the cover of Wolf Soldier, and other things, but nobody that I described it to before had really hit that sort of ethereal nature, because this is a structure we wanted to incorporate Light Raider Academy with the Great Rescue story. So the rising of the celestial peaks, the peaks of the new beginning, if you're a original Dragon Raid fan, and the structure is originally an elder folk place of worship, an enclave. And it's this circular structure. So it's got multiple walls in a ring on a top of a hill. But when the rising of the peaks happens, and sort of the breaking of the land that separated out the liberated land and protected it from the dragons, this structure rode up on those peaks and became this multi-level fortress with all the insides sort of jumbled up and yet made into a new creation that makes sense, that would become Lightraider Academy. So nobody seemed to get the beginning of it being something created by and almost an angelic group of, if you would think of almost Tolkien's elves, but these are a little bit more tighter, allegorical, angelic creatures that were walking the land before the dragon scourge. And so they are the builders, and they create all sorts of fantastical locations for the series, Ross Telesar being one of them. And I think you're the first guy that in my book captured that. So I'm going to share the screen now and let you talk about
Sure.
how you came up with this.
Okay. All right. If I remember reading the description, yeah, there it is. What came to mind initially was Tolkien's Minas Tirith, the White City, and its many levels. And obviously, I wanted something ethereal to match your description, but I also wanted a sense of scale, gigantic scale, and without the use of turning it into a painting or a full illustration, just reducing it to black and white, I knew that the challenge is going to be giving that sense of scale with just a black and white drawing. So what I decided to do was, if you look down at the very bottom, at the portcullis gate there, you'll see two guards standing there, and you can get a sense of just how gigantic those statues are. And I really wanted that scale to be felt. So then all of a sudden, the real sense of the size and the majesty of this location came through. And that's what finally got it together. As I was drawing it, I said, no, it's not quite there yet. What do I need to incorporate to really impart this incredible scale and majesty and mystery and the ethereal nature that, yes, divine beings had a hand in this creation, and even in the sculpting of those two gigantic statues, which are building size, they're skyscraper size, really.
Right. Yeah.
And that's kind of what I wanted. So once I got the two guards at the bottom, then the scale really came along, and the multiple waterfalls, and I wanted to add even some birds in the sky and so on, but just I wanted something vast, and I was happy with how it turned out. You were very specific in your description of not only the statues but the globes atop the statues, and how each specific level had a structure on it, as you can see. I also chose, instead of doing the typical notched walls, I use angel feather winged design. I don't know if that was picked up on immediately, but that's why you have the scalloped edges to each wall. That's a reference to angelic feathers from the traditional angelic look that we all grew up seeing in the illustrations and in paintings. So overall, I was happy with it turnout. I was glad you were pleased with the.
Yeah. So the scalloping is, so we got to solve ramparts, because we but we don't want the traditional sort of brick type or cinder block, whatever type ramparts, squarish, because we're talking about a different kind of structure. We're also talking structure that was a place of worship before it became a fortress. And so the scalloping with, reminiscent of the wings really was a fantastic solution to that problem. Also, you creating, there is, if you look at the picture until you dip down and you actually see those guards down there, and I zoomed in on the picture while you were talking, so folks could really see the guards. You don't get so having those guards there gave us that sense of scale, so that we can really appreciate what maybe the awe that the cadets get as they're first seeing Light Raider Academy or first approaching Light Raider Academy.
What I'd love to do if other projects develop and manifest, I would love to have the opportunity to draw that structure from the viewpoint of a cadet walking up to it. If you can imagine the scene in Lord of the Rings where the characters are in boats on the river and they pass the two giant statues, almost that sense of epic scale and fill, but looking up toward them from a worm's eye view, so to speak. That would just be a fantastic challenge to.
Oh yeah, that would, and when it would, the final product would be also fantastic. So, yeah, if we're able to do other things, then that might be an excellent option there.
Oh yeah, it'd be fun. That would be fun to do.
So much else to talk about. So let's do a contrast here. Okay. Because we've looked at Light Raider Academy, and now I want to look at and that's the sort of, if you would, the forces of light in this the forces of the rescuer, who's the Christ figure. Now let's look at the darkness guys, and so we're going to talk about the Dragon Fortress, and again, it's exceptional work. You brought forward, you didn't just make a fortress, you made a fortress that looks like a pretty scary place, this stronghold of evil. So I'm going to bring this one up, and I gave you a description, but I mean, there are so many elements here that are all Dean.
Well, I'll start by saying this was a challenge based on the description, because your verbal or written description focused primarily on that globe-shaped object in the middle of the gates, being with the doors that look like an orange peel, pulling back. And that opening was something that I knew I had to get right because it was so specifically described. Also, the dark nature of the material that this is constructed of, I had to make certain that it was imposing. And again, as a sense of scale, to satisfy your need for the specific description of the mechanical nature of those four towers with the chains pulling that gate apart, that globe apart. I had to do an aerial view. There was no other way to do it. And so I said, okay, again, I have to create a sense of drama, a sense of scale and size. So I wanted it to just be huge. And so you have, if you look closely inside the four walls in the center, you'll see the area where the guards or whoever the military who would be stationed here, where they would stay. They would stay in those little structures there. So again, it gives you an idea of how big this actually is. The skull shape of the dragon is my idea. And I put that in because it just struck me that these creatures, as you describe them, the Granogs, are so vain and so self-absorbed that their self-focus demanded that they put themselves in everything. So just a simple structure was not going to be sufficient to communicate how self-absorbed and how arrogant these beings actually are. And of course, pride being so associated with the enemy, I wanted pride to be all over this dark fortress. So what better way to display their pride and self-absorption than to make their head part of the structure, which is what you see here. and organically sculpted by their sorcery or necromancy, however you would wish to describe it. And then finally, again, to give it a sense of scale and distance as we're flying in, it needed some motion. It was a little bit static without a dragon. And I said, I have to bring a dragon into this. This was the perfect place to do it. So almost what this becomes is almost a dragon POV, the companion of the dragon that's flying. And I wanted, again, a way to give it motion and scale and drama. And so I just, the dragon was not requested by you, and I threw it in there. I thought it would be a great way to solve.
We are absolutely grateful for it. Because it brings so much to the image, but also I want to say that image, you shamed me a little bit with this particular image, because when you came back with it in the description, there was a lot of structural requests, and I focused a lot on the mechanics of the dome, because I had spent in research for Wolf Soldier a lot of time trying to solve that particular mechanical problem in a way that would be possible in this world. And you nailed it, right? You nailed it, because we talk about, you see a structure being built by goblins, guarded by orcs, and there's 4 spires. And so the people there immediately know a dragon stronghold is coming, and that's not a good thing. Right. Even if you're an Aladoth, you know that, a once-born person. But everything was about structure. And one of the key aspects of dragons in the game is their pride, their ambition, their pride, their infighting. In the storylines that James Brown and I are building for this world, and that you'll see coming in the adventures, we are going to see some dragon politics and the fighting between them, and repercussions that their fighting has and their arrogance on the Aladoth around them and their suffering. And so what your missions are to go in and rescue people amid all of that. But so the pride of the dragons, and so absolutely, like, why didn't I think of that? The dragon is going to make his fortress into an edifice to himself. And because these creatures are fallen, or they're fallen elder folk. And so they have some of that knowledge of the original creation. They're very old, and so they're able to get their goblin minions and builders and things to. So again, the structure does not look like a human-made structure, and we don't want it to look like a human-made structure, because this is a stronghold of a dragon, and so the towers are formed as if they're clearly not formed by human hands, and tireless labor provided by fungal creatures, and then the shaping of the edifice of the main building being a part of the dragon. Anyway, so just fantastic work.
Thank you. That part of what inspired me, aside from just your description of the mechanics of the structure, was the scriptural Nebuchadnezzar. I thought, there has to be a statue or some sort of visual representation of a dragon here. Just there has to be somewhere. And that's what occurred to me when I came up with the edifice itself being a giant dragon head. So it's, again, that's another one of those structures that I can't wait to draw from a different POV, because it would be huge, and just sprawling, huge, majestic, powerful, and scary in its scale, aside from its look, but also the scale of it would be epic.
All right, so I'm gonna bring up another one of the creatures that you made, and this one is the Granog. And if you're a fan of the original game, we're talking about Greedos here, and we did a lot of nomenclature changes. Some of that was part of before it was the publishing, so getting the books going before the game was going. We had to create a little bit more realistic fantasy realm for the young adult audience that we were serving, and so we took some of the nomenclature, like the peaks of the new beginning became the celestial peaks, things like that. And all of this was, we actually had a discussion with Dick Wolf before he passed about all these changes as well. So the Granog was one of them. And of course, this is sort of a dragon administrator fleecing the people, but they're more than that in the world. They're vicious, and they are what we call the dragon sorcery, which is really trickery and illusion because of their elder knowledge of creation. They use the Granogs as sort of projections of that to maintain the mystery over the people. So here I'm going to bring that up because we're talking about a creature that is has man and dragon type features, and so really making an intimidating and imposing creature was the goal, not a comical figure. So Dean, I'm not even sure exactly what I said in the description, but I couldn't be more happy with the result.
Well, thank you. Again, here, what you described was a regal character that was meticulous in its dress to the point of wearing jewelry. And so you'll see that there are rings on the fingers of this creature. You wanted to incorporate some of the runes that we see on a lot of the dark creatures. So I added that to actually the wings and the braces that he's wearing. I wanted a fantasy look of a warlord, but a sort of fussy warlord that really pays a lot more attention to silk and fabric and jewelry and a decorative sword that would still kill, but is particularly designed by him. More of a Nero than a Genghis Khan here. This is a very decadent being, and that's really the sense I got. And so I wanted a face that was fearsome and dragon-like, a humanoid dragon, but I also wanted the idea that this creature had finesse. It was deadly, but it was also political. So the most wicked humanoid politician you could imagine, and that's kind of how I approached it.
The Granogs are an interesting case to discuss in the change of the creatures in this world. So this was discussed long ago that the creatures in the original Dragon Raid, and this is the original Dragon Raid handbook with some of the creatures in it. They came from different planets. There's a bit of a sci-fi mashup in this, and you had the potential for good versions of these creatures that came from a different planet. And we wanted to do away with that because we wanted to keep the game about battling sin and destroying sin. And so we didn't want maybe redeemable creatures. And so these are all soulless corruptions of creation. So the goblins, which we'll take a look at in a sec. I'm not even sure if I have a goblin example queued up, but we can talk about them. They're fungus. They're made of fungus, and your goblin with his little mushrooms growing on him is fantastic. You got a little mushroom shaped head. Not in a campy way either, but it, you made him look realistic and evil, and while still having that little fungal look. And then the orcs are ore creatures. They go back to various kinds of ore. You have iron orcs and coal orcs and tellurium orcs, which is like the common steel in the entire realm. And then the trolls, like we talked about, the tree trolls is a rotted tree. So those were a little bit easier to transition to this soulless corruption of creation, but the Granogs are a unique case because they're administrators. And so I want to talk about how the Granogs kind of work and why that what you nailed with the silks and the jewels and the arrogance is sort of incorporated into the AI. So these corruptions are like automatons. They're set in motion by the dragons because of their knowledge of creation, and they can't create. They can only corrupt. So they've made these beings, and they're their best illusion of a creation, and so with a soul. And so if you think of we're now getting to the level as humans where we're creating Chat GPT and other AI that can give itself that can have the illusion of a soul, an illusion of thinking and talking. And so the dragons being having that deep knowledge because they were there from the dawn of creation, have their ability to infuse these creatures with something of that nature. And so these are creatures that are acting out a role like as NPCs that was given to them, and they're playing this role. But somewhere in the programming, somewhere is that jealousy that they're not real, that they're not the dragons, and they'll never be the dragons. And from that, they have to put on the trappings of royalty and lordship, because somewhere there's a glitch in all these creatures. There's some glitch essentially in the programming. The other glitch that the Granogs have is they were given wings like the dragons, but they absolutely hate to fly. And there's a little bit of history behind that that's revealed in Bear Knight if you want to read that book. But anyway, so another great creature that we could talk about. And now I'm going to bring up our guardian that you showed with the that you talked about, or that I talked about with your dynamic leaves here. Back to the screen share. All right, so here's our guardian, and there are so many more elements in this. I don't remember giving in a description so many details. I think I said he might have a book in his hand, but there's more to this. And then the war staff is fantastic. So talk to us about the guardian.
Sure. There were specific requirements that the guardian have: keys, a book. The war staff was described in terms of you wanted a blade on one end and you wanted a starlit jewel on the other. And so I made certain to meet all of those, but also wanted to exceed your expectations with this as much as possible, because again, to me, this was, for lack of a better comparison, this was the Gandalf template for the story. And I wanted someone who was wise, but also formidable, not an aged wizard who was a bit absent-minded like Gandalf, but certainly more like Gandalf the White, someone who has all their faculties at their peak, fighting ability, knowledge, maturity, spiritual power at its peak, but also a resolve to do what must be done. The flowing cape was something that I think I exaggerated because I wanted the sense of, again, a powerful character that was almost wizard-like, certainly someone that projected protection, power, spiritual maturity, strength. Again, you wanted the symbols of the light to be evident. So again, here with the buckle and on the book itself. And again, I went for the vest to have. I always wanted that Crusader motif to be evident there. So the Christian theme on every character that I designed that was a light character, I wanted that Crusader element to be prominent. Other than that, other than just standing there, which is fine, a strong stance is good for designing characters. For the Guardian, I wanted to go beyond standing. And so the idea came to me to have him striding forward to some purpose, some noble purpose, but also, again, as earlier I mentioned, atmosphere. And even in a black and white illustration like this, I had to find a way to give it more atmosphere, more motion. So the flowing leaves, setting it in the fall season, which to me brings to mind fantasy immediately. that added the motion I wanted. And so bringing all of that together to project your description of the character as much as possible, and again, exceed your expectations. And I'm glad you liked it. I was happy with how it turned out.
So I'm zeroing in here on a couple of things. You have I believe this is a crossbow hanging from his belt. So you have the crossbow hanging from his belt, which, you know, shows these, you know, he's got multiple weapons here. This is he's a guardian, and he's got that Gandalf look, and Gandalf obviously had his rough and tumble moments. But you know, this is not a man leaning on a staff. He's carrying a staff that is just absolutely deadly, but also gorgeous with its kind of scroll work there and the gleam of the blade. And then the face, his sternness. You talked about his resolve, and so he's striding forward with complete resolve and purpose. The other thing I want to ask about is we have the oversized starlot up here at the top of the staff. Underneath that, in the metalwork, we have what appears to be a face. Was that intentional?
It was, and I wanted it to be a mysterious reference that didn't need to be explained, but that might inspire the writer to use that later. There are times when I'm designing weapons or armor or details on a costume where something just occurs to me. There needed to be a face here, it reminiscent of the way we see something on a door knocker, a lion, perhaps, something along those lines. But I wanted it to be ethereal and not particularly specific, but certainly to invoke the idea that maybe this was some angelic being's face from time before time, that sort of thing.
I think, you know, when I saw it, what it reminded me of the concept, you know, weapons sting in the Lord of the Rings, the sword that was broken and reforged, all those things in various lores. Weapons take on a character of their own, and objects. You know, if he loses, you know, I can almost picture him if he loses the staff shouting, "Well, son!" But. Yeah. So this, you know, this guardian has this staff that's been with him a long time, and it has a character of its own. The number of dark creatures it has killed and destroyed in the name of the rescuer while saving the lost. And so, you know, when we give a weapon a name, this one has sort of a face to go with the name, and I really appreciated that.
I'm glad you liked that. The idea was to almost invoke the scriptural concept of the Nephilim in a way. You know, maybe there were, you know, creatures inexplicable that were divine, that were involved in the time before the flood and so on. And just this idea that we don't really know, and that may be something that you expand upon later, and it may not be. I just thought it looked inspiring.
We do. We allude to it in the Lightraider handbook, which you haven't gotten a chance to read. But we do allude to the war between when the elder folk, when Halayor, who is the great red dragon, grabbed his companions that were willing to turn on the Maker and turned against him. There was a war, and so there are villains and heroes in that battle among the elder folk. And perhaps this weapon, that face refers to one of the heroes of those battles that struck fear into the hearts of the betrayers before they actually became the dragons. And so throwing that face can be part of striking dumb the evil creatures that we're going to face, or this guardian has had to face down. All right, I think I've got one more here that actually got another one real quick. Do you have time, Dean?
I do, certainly do.
I've got two more that I want to talk about.
Okay.
Two more pictures. One was a bonus for us. You drew some sprites for us. And you did such a great job with all your options. We had to have both. And so I'm going to show you the one that was it was not like the second choice, but it was the one that became the bonus sprite that we asked for. Let me pull the Guardian down on my screen and bring this one up. Come on. Well, sometimes the computer cooperates, sometimes it doesn't.
Well, while we're waiting, I'll throw this out just to reflect a bit on what you discussed before, and that is, I love statuary, and I think this world lends itself to more statuary than you describe when you do describe environments to me. So if I'm blessed with the opportunity to continue to do more work, I would love to include even more statuary referring to heroes and villains from the past that may or may not be described by you. There may be some in one of the drawings that is available to those who can get to it. The secret drawing we've referred to many times, there is actual statuary referenced in that drawing as well. So that's something that if you're agreeable to, that I will include and continue to include in the environments for certain. I want
that's a really cool concept, and I do love elements of the past from my previous studies back when I was studying the Middle East. A lot of counterterrorism focus because I was military, but we were also studying the history of the Middle East in different ways that was done. But in my travels, being able to see works of the past, I think we shy away from that in our arts because we're afraid of idolatry.
Right.
But we're not talking about idolatry here. We're talking about edifices of the past, remembrances of the past. And when we want to talk about the Telania, in the Lightraiders realm, in the world of Dastan, we know that there was this whole era that preceded the Lightraiders, that preceded the rising of the peaks, which represents the Christ's death and resurrection.
Yes.
And so we want to have references to that area. What I do like to do, and what I've done in the past, I think I did this in the Moonbridge 3, was bring those. And when I do, I usually bring it because it's a remembrance of the past era. I like to bring in Old Testament verses in those scenes and kind of marry those up together. But let's bring up the sprite here. And there were some almost, you took a risk on these. I've got to get this. I accidentally zoomed in too much. There we go. So you took a risk because what in the description, I gave you very insect-like creature because these creatures belong to sort of the ento dragons, the insect-like dragons, and they're sort of roach minions. And so what I described was a little bit more of a gross insect creature. You came back with these sprites, but they also attack self-control, and they represent the alluring nature of evil. And so go ahead and tell me your thoughts here.
Well, again, when I read the description and you did include this insect-like reference. And I even had some visuals that you had sent me that previous artists had done. And I looked them over, and I kept reading the idea that these beings were representing something that were tempting and beguiling. And I had a little bit of a challenge reconciling insect-like beings, because I couldn't put that together. Like, if they're insect-like, how would that beguile a human? And then I thought, well, let me accent the insect aspect with the wings and keep the rest of the being more humanoid, but slightly with elongated limbs that might imply a praying mantis type of insect, but without it being a repulsive element. And again, if you look at her arms and her fingers, they're a little bit longer than a human would have and a little bit strange, but I wanted the face to just be hypnotic in that sort of Tolkien elf way, where if you looked at this being and she smiled at you, you might be entranced enough to forget that her arms were too long and looked a little insect-like, and she had these, odd dragonfly-esque wings behind her. And if I'm not mistaken, this became the winter sprite.
This is the winter sprite, which you accented nicely, the sort of the snowflake looks in the sparkles behind her.
Correct. So again, ethereal, but the aesthetics needed to be something elegant and insect-like, more in a subtle way. And as you said, I did intentionally take a risk, because I thought, well, if James doesn't like it, I'll be happy to add a more insect-like aspect to her. But let's give this a try and explain why I approached it this way. And luckily, you agreed. So,
well, this was another one of those things where you shamed me a little bit, where I wasn't focused on the dragon's pride, and you brought that out. Let's look at the aspects of these evil creatures. And so the evil is not so obvious all the time. We know in our world that evil is certainly not obvious, and works at being alluring. And so these creatures sort of create this mirage, and you'll find out if you play the game in the Initiate's Quest, you'll find out what these creatures are like when the mirage falls away. But we have hints of it, and I really, really liked what you did with the shoulders. And again, the elongated arms to give hints at that. You're not even sure there's not going to be another set of arms that comes around with a dagger that's going to get you, and a sting of some sort. So you got to watch out for these. They're tricky and they're dangerous. So watch out for sprites without giving too many spoilers away. So I've got one more thing here. We came to you late asking for additional illustrations for the handbook, which you were gracious enough to provide. And so this is one of them. This is my favorite among those. And it does, again, kind of draw back to it brings Tolkien feel into the book. And so I think you know which one I'm talking about here. And so here he comes.
Okay.
He's the Char Dragon.
Char Dragon, indeed. You sent me a list. You said I don't have enough visualizations of the dragons, and you sent me a list of dragons to choose from, and you had a lot of cool descriptions. And I thought, I want to do something that people haven't seen, and so I chose the Char Dragon, and another one. And you said, oh, wow, you chose the toughest ones. And I did, because I really wanted a challenge to see if I could bring it to life. So the way you had described it was almost as if it was charcoal in its structure. So the idea came to me was the early visualization I had of the Balrog from Tolkien, from Fellowship of the Ring, where it was shadow and flame. But even more so with this design, I wanted the creature itself to seem as if it was made from charcoal with light from within, dark red light shining through the cracks as if it's made of magma. And even to the point where when it opens its mouth, it's dripping lava. And obviously, as you see here with the inks, you know, the smoldering of smoke out of its mouth, the eyes, but also those wings are definitely a nod to the Balrog without any doubt. But I had fun with this. I also, if you look carefully, I wanted the fragments of the charcoal skin, so to speak, to be coming off of it, almost as if it's so evil and so hot, almost that it leaves, again, with the atmosphere in mind, it leaves remnants of itself wherever it goes. So as it challenges you and stands there and extends its wings, you know, little fragments of ash and smoke and pieces of charcoal float off of it. Some of them float, some of them fall, maybe even embers fly.
Yeah, the embers was the concept of the embers floating off of this thing, which I really love that from a future writing perspective.
I'm glad. But again, it was just that idea, and to impart that in a black and white piece. Again, it would be great to revisit this dragon in a story at some point. Hopefully, we'll be able to do that. But yeah, this was fun. If you look at the very crest that I placed on the dragon's head, in lieu of horns, I almost wanted, again, two pieces of horn-shaped charcoal just poked backwards, almost like ears, reminiscent of ears and or horns. But I wanted the eyes to be just hypnotic and evil. So I went with just a fully round shape where you almost are transfixed by this thing. If it was looking directly at you, it would be difficult to look away and you would be struck with fear immediately. So all of that together, hopefully it communicates that in the drawing.
It really does. We have a comment from White Winged Dragonfly that says that was asking about Valshadix, who's from the stories, and you know, if I think he might have been a Char Dragon if you had created this by the time that story was written. But we'll find a place for these. I do hope we are able to do color versions of all of these creatures and people in the future, because in this particular case would be a very dramatic piece. It already is a dramatic piece, but even more so in color with the embers glowing inside, and really bring out what his horns look like, and so on and so forth. But there's a lot of creative potential spawned by this concept that's and what you drew here. Because you know, when I wrote you the description, I said you've chosen the hardest one. There was no I was like, I don't know how to visualize this effectively, and you came back with this, which is just amazing. So that's sort of the finale piece. I appreciate you being here. We got about 8 minutes left, and so I'm going to leave it up and see if we do have we want to see all the dragons by Mr. Zachary, especially the Dream Dragon. Okay, so there's prompts for the future.
Awesome.
But do we have any questions for the artist in the chat room here? I'm gonna throw that out there. I know there's a little bit of a delay
Okay.
from when I ask that question when it actually goes to the audience. But hopefully we'll get some questions if anybody has any.
One thing I'd like to mention as we wait,
go.
I'm really thankful not only for the opportunity to be involved in a project that promotes learning the gospel and studying scripture, but certainly in our culture today, I believe that content of this caliber is precisely what is needed to give young people more of an education that brings the quest for what is good, what is true, and what is beautiful back to the forefront, but also what is the truth. And just wanted to bring that out and say, this is a blessing for me as well.
Oh, well, we're blessed that you're involved too. So thank you very much. Haven't seen any questions pop into the chat quite yet. We get Jeff says thanks. Guys, you're awesome. So we did earlier have a couple of comments that said Dean is my favorite artist, and a remembrance of the ferret as a classic. So you have folks who know more of your work in the chat. And it says, would it be okay to share some of what you described as the process of creating artwork with some of my art students? Do you mean if you mean share this video, Dean, is it okay to share this video?
Absolutely. With the absolutely. Please do. And feel free to ask any questions about process and or inspiration, reference, and so on. And you can also you can find my work on Instagram, Dean Zachary Art, also on X, formerly Twitter, Dean Zachary Art. And I try to upload regularly, at least a couple of times a week. Obviously, in recent weeks, it's been a lot of build up to this project specifically, and I was so happy to do that. But there'll be other work as well. There'll be more work with this project we're hoping for. And I wanted to just before I go to ask you, James, like what is your wish list in terms of how to manifest Lightraiders beyond the books and the game? If you could expand on where you see this going, or where you would like to see it go.
So the game has always been the priority. We did the books first because we had a lot of buildup to do to get to this point where we would be able to fund a production run. Plus, we had a lot of work to do to prepare it, obviously, and have something that was worthy. But so the outreach and Dick Wolf's original concept of building disciples for Christ through this storytelling format and using the participation in the story that not just a book provides, but this role-playing game format provides. We believe that, and especially with what we've done, where you have it's episodic. You're able to focus on 4, 5, 6 verses at a time, and not just the memorization of the verse, but their application. That is the primary goal. So we're going to get the 6 semesters of the game out, and then some more freeform games that are reminiscent of Moonbridge 3, map-based with encounters. To give the adventure master a lot of freedom in moving about the map and finding Easter eggs of, so to speak. But then beyond that, we do have some hopes, and we are the primary game provider for Rise Up Con, which is a Christian Comic Con that's coming this summer. Dean will be there, and
Absolutely.
we're grateful for him. And that's put on by Kevin Sorbo and Dean Kane. And so the focus of that is not games. It's something else. It's streaming and other types of productions. So we will be there. We will be prepared in case Dean or Kevin or one of the other producer types that are there asks. Yes, Lightraiders is going to be prepared to hopefully provide some IP for some on-screen stuff to further the spread of the kingdom. And then we do have hopes in the novel realm for something that we might be able to involve Dean in. And we hope that all of the promotion of this, and we know that there's a demand for that. That's the thing, is every time we put up a booth, every time we go working with a bookstore, we get asked questions, and I'm just going to say we get asked questions about graphic novels. And where are the Christian graphic novels? Well, they're hard to come by. There's a few, but we think that if we can get that going, then that's also an outlet for the word and for our adventures. So I've got a question from the audience here. How many versions do you normally draw before you settle on one?
It's a great question. I usually draw 3 versions, and it comes from my background in advertising. When I was called on by a client to do an illustration or a logo design and that sort of thing, I would always do 3. And the humorous reasoning behind that was always 1 for me, 1 for the client, and a hybrid that they would hopefully choose. And so variations of that still exist in my design process, but I usually do 3 designs, and by then I've got something that I feel like is going to work and satisfy what the client wants.
What are you drawing on initially?
Usually I have a sketchbook. It's a 9x12 Strathmore sketchbook you can find in any art supply store. Hobby Lobby is where I shop. And I'll just draw pencil to paper there. That's for usually what I call the 100% size. I literally trace the outline of a comic book size onto the page, and then I'll design it at that size. When I come up with a page design that I'm happy with, I'll increase the size to the 11x17 Bristol board size. The trim of the image itself comes out about 10x15. And so all of my illustrations that are published are done 10x15. And so you'll see me, if you come visit the show, which I hope you will, I'll have portfolios that contain the original art, the 10x15 art, and you'll see a lot of things from comics, but a lot of things from Lightraiders that way as well.
Anyway, he says, come visit. That's Rise Up Con is in Sayreville, Tennessee, May 31st and June 1st. And we will be there with a 30-foot Lightraiders booth and Dean. And we'll hopefully have, we'll actually have a game section that they're going to provide for us to play some Lightraiders and maybe some star lots and other things. So, so yes, don't miss that. And you'll be able to see a lot more of Dean's process. All right. So we are out of time. I'm going to go ahead and pray us out and then end the live stream. But we really appreciate all of you who are out there. We appreciate your questions and your interaction. It means a lot. And obviously, we appreciate your backing the project. Please go tell your friends. Please go tell your youth pastors, whoever you can, because what we keep saying it in the updates. But if we can get, we're going to do this. So we have the funding we need, plus which includes a donation that's outside of this funding that will get us into production. But if we can get to 500 backers or so, we will have the funding to get to really push that production cost down to the point where we'll be close to, we're kind of taking a risk on the campaign prices here. And that's not what we're going to be able to sell the games at. But if we can get those 500 backers, we should be able to push production costs down to where we're about $49.99 a box or so for the bookstores that buy from us and things like that. So that's the goal, but we're not going to be able to do that unless we in the next 24 days really push those backers out there, and that's word of mouth. We've done social media, we've done influencers, we've done everything else, but the fact is that when you're talking about a Christian product that its purpose is to teach scripture memory and application, there's a narrow enough market that it's going to be among our group of people, those kind of word of mouth. And so we're depending on you we appreciate that you've backed us already. We realize that's also taken a lot, but we're asking you to go another mile and tell as many folks as you can and bring them to the page. So I'm going to pray us out real quick, and then we'll say goodbye. Again, thanks to all of you. Father God, we are so grateful for you and for your goodness. You are a good God and a great and mighty God. And Father, we do look forward to the return of your kingdom here on earth. In the meantime, we ask that you help us and enable us and strengthen us to further your kingdom here on earth, so that we can bring as many brothers and sisters with us home to you when the time comes. So Father, just place your hand on this Lightraiders project and all those who will use it to disciple others. Place your hand on Dean and his work and all his amazing talent, and just enable him to use it in many ways for your glory. And just bless, Father God, our backers, and just place your hand on their lives and give them strength as they spread your word and disciple others. And your name, amen.
Amen.
All right, folks, we will see you later. I'm going to go hit the end of the live